Introduction. Tempo. This is the most powerful weapon you have as a jungler. Unfortunately, this is the most overcomplicated concept in League of Legends history. If I were to ask 100 people what tempo is, I would probably get 100 different definitions. Funnily enough, it's actually very easy to understand. And once understood, when you use it in your own games, which is what I'm going to teach you in this course, you will end games before they have even started. This is the true essence of what challenger jungling at the highest levels is about. Chapter 1. What is tempo? The real definition. Tempo is quite simply this: recalling to run at a resource. Now, the easiest way to explain what this means is to think about each champion at the start of a game. At the start of a game, everyone has the same tempo. Why? That's because everyone is running out of base at the same time, or they should be anyway. So this is how we measure tempo. Who is running out of base first? This is significant throughout a game because running out of base comes after doing what? In other words, what do you do in base? Or when you're in the fountain? You can spend your gold. You interact with the chat shopkeeper who gives you some items and you run out stronger than you were before. You evolve. It's very important to understand that everyone has a tempo. And as junglers, you always need to be aware of not only your tempo, in other words, when you recall, but also the tempo the enemy jungler has. When are they going to recall and where will they run out of base? Before we get into some jungling examples, I think the most salient examples to really explain what tempo is come from lanes. The reason being is because laners are always running back to the same resource, the lane itself. Why is the lane a resource? Because there is golden experience in the form of minions, turret plates, and the enemy laner or laners. This is consistent in every game. For example, when Zhao Chao Meng, a challenger top laner on the Chinese super server, kills Renekton in this game, he is only thinking about recalling as soon as possible because look at Renekton's death timer. This dude is only dead for 8 seconds. In other words, XCM would have to recall right now to have the same tempo. But even that's not true anymore because Riot introduced movement speed bonuses to champions running out of base if they had just died, kind of like home guards. So if XCM was to recall even straight away, he would still be around 5 seconds later than Renekton running out of base. So what every good laner will do after solo killing their opponent, especially when the lane is still young, is recall ASAP. So after killing a few minions, and we don't need to worry about this in this course, XCM backs. This is Showmaker doing exactly the same thing. After solo killing Talon, who is dead for around 10 seconds, he clears these minions and recalls instead of staying for the next wave. Why? Tempo. Now yes, he might not have much mana to shove that quickly, but even if he had mana, he's going to base. Now you might be wondering why recall though? Like, why is it important to base after getting a kill if you're a laner? Well, what we are describing here through tempo is literally what a snowball is. A snowball does not happen when a champion sits on a Doran's Blade until 10 minutes. It happens because after killing their opponent first early on, and they would have done so with the same gold spent, surely it would then be even easier to knock them out again when you've cashed in more gold at the shop. Well, of course, right? Each time you fight, you are increasingly stronger than your opponent, and there is one way it ends, a hard stop. Let's have a look at XCM in the same game. He has spent around 1,600 gold on items. The Renekton has spent 800 gold on items. And because he has such a lead materialized, a lead doesn't exist unless you have a lead in items. Please remember that. He is ahead of lots of other enemy champions. This allows him to quite comfortably 1v2 the enemy Renekton and Nidalee, and he ends up going 18-0 against some of the best players in the world, believe it or not. This is so critical in the early game because your items mean more. If you have 80 attack damage at level 3 and recall to buy 2 longswords, those 2 longswords represent 20 attack damage of your 100 total attack damage. That's 20%. That is legit. What happens if you have 140 attack damage and do the same thing? Well, that would mean those longswords account for 20 attack damage of your 160 total attack damage, which is 12.5%, a little bit less. So really early on, it's huge. This is the science behind early game snowballing, and we achieve this through tempo. In other words, recalling. Chapter 2. How do we apply tempo? This is the million-dollar question. How do we apply tempo in terms of the jungle then? If laning tempo is just about recalling and running back to lane, what is jungling tempo? And by the way, guys, because I'm such a nice guy, I want to help the homies out. There is a 20% sale on all coaching on my website for the rest of Season 13, so if you want to hit your dream rank by the time Season 13 ends, all you have to do is click on the I in the top right, and that's it. I hope you're enjoying the course so far. So jungling tempo. Well, all we are trying to do is replace minion waves that laners have with resources that junglers have, and these are jungle camps or objectives. Jungle camps, of course, being Gromp, Wolves, Raptors, Krugs, and both buffs, and objectives being the river objectives, Dragons, and Rift Heralds, or Barons. So in saying that, it is imperative to know when these camps spawn. So now we know what these resources are. Tempo for us junglers is literally recalling and running at one of these camps or river objectives. The key to mastering the art of tempo is timing. You don't want to recall and run at second dragon, for example, only to be there 20 seconds after a respawn. Why? Well, the enemy jungler can can do it in that time. In that case, you are the one wasting time because you could have farmed your camps instead of running to an empty dragon pit. So what you're essentially doing is recalling and running at a jungling resource because you think it's more worth than doing another resource. We will get into plenty of examples in the upcoming chapters, but just to give you a sneak peek, in this game, I killed the enemy jungler, and after tilting a little bit because my F2 key was randomly unbinded, I then recall. I'm going to pause it here for a few seconds because I'm not going to show the outcome. You need to be able to visualize what I could do here with this tempo, with this recall. Remember, recalling allows us to buy items, and after killing your direct opponent, the enemy jungler, you will have more gold than them. But this can still happen if you kill the enemy laners as well, and the enemy jungler isn't getting as much gold. So it's almost like you're transferring the gold you got from a lane into the jungle matchup. But back to this, if Hecarim is running out of base with just a longsword, for example, I might have 2 longswords. In other games, it might be a longsword versus Dirk, or Amp Tome versus Sorcerer's Shoes, and I will reveal what happens here in the next chapter. How exciting. Now back to the timing. How do we actually go about getting this timing spot on? Well, we need to know how long it takes to recall, and how long it takes to run to that resource. Thankfully, recalling always takes 8 seconds. But what about running to all the jungle camps, the buffs, the dragons? There's too many. Let's relax. How long does it take to run to an inhib? Well, with no boots, it takes 10 seconds. So this line, therefore, represents 10 seconds. And this is all you have to do. You just have to envision these 10-second lines on the minimap. So if I copy that line from this bot inhib to Krugs, it will almost get me to Krugs. That means it probably takes me around 25 seconds to run out of base to my Krugs. What about if I run from Krugs to Raptors? Well, if we take this 10-second line and put it over the top, it looks about right. It takes me around 10 seconds. What about if I go from Raptors to the enemy blue buff? Well, because I have to go around a bit of terrain, it might take me a little bit longer, so around 15 seconds maybe. That's also about right. Being able to see your movement in terms of time is vital. Remember, just going from Krugs to Raptors takes 10 seconds. So let's think of a real situation, and I will cover all of these in the next couple of chapters. In this game, I started at red buff and cleared all my camps towards topside. I then killed the Jace and took the Scuttle Crab, and then I recalled. Why? Well, that's because my Krugs are spawning around 4 minutes 10 seconds. Shaco is a lot quicker than other junglers. Normally, it would be around 4 minutes 20 seconds. So when I start my recall at 355, knowing the recalling takes 8 seconds and running to Krugs takes close to 25 seconds, that's around 33 seconds. I will get to Krugs around 4 minutes 25 seconds. Now, I'm never really that specific. I've just done that to show you the exact numbers. In my head, I'll probably just think of 30 seconds to base and get to Krugs. Timing is everything. And this continues throughout a game. Don't just think this is an early game thing. Camps keep spawning, buffs keep spawning, dragons keep spawning, barons keep spawning. Chapter 3, Attacking Tempo. There are 2 forms of tempo, attacking and defensive. Timing your recalls so you protect your own camps is one thing, that's defensive tempo, but recalling to run at the enemy jungler's camps, that's the next level up. And this attacking tempo is what we are now going to talk about and illustrate. Now, you don't just recall and run at the enemy jungler's camps because you can. You do it because you are significantly stronger than the enemy jungler and you can kill them on repeat, just like a laner would. This is critical to remember. Now, I'm not going to go through every jungler in the game and evaluate their early game strength. If you're a main of that champion, you should know if you can kill the enemy jungler or at least pressure them. But generally speaking, champions who have little DPS early game are the weaker ones, like Kayn, Zac, Echo, Evelynn. Compare these to Conqueror or lethal tempo junglers like Lee Sin, Viego, Nocturne, Trundle. There is a massive difference. Let's revisit that clip I showed you in chapter 2 when I recall to run at my Krugs. Can you see any attacking tempo I might have here? I know Lee Sin started on his red buff quadrant and cleared Krugs and Raptors. So could I use this in any way? Well, yes, I could decide to run there at a base. These camps will respawn, but what is stopping Lee Sin from being there? Surely he cares about his respawning Krugs and Raptors, and that's the thing. Because I'm AP Shaco, I really am a bad duelist, I would struggle to 1v1 a caster minion, so I think that's way too risky, and that's why I run to my Krugs. Now let's reveal what happens in that Hecarim clip. So quick refresh, I killed the Hecarim, and then knew he had done his blue buff quadrant, but nothing else because he only has 12 CS. So is there attacking tempo here? Well, I know I can kill him on his red buff. How have I arrived at that decision? And well done if you called it. Well, if he's done his blue buff quadrant, he will run to his red buff quadrant at a base. He is also dead for 10 seconds, which gives me enough time to recall myself, even though I do it a little bit later, and then sprint towards his topside after spending twice the amount of gold he has spent. Now, as I run towards topside, I see him on Raptors, which is a little bit weird. Maybe he thought I was going to take them. So now I know I actually have enough time to take a couple of camps along the way. If I go there instantly, then I'm going to be waiting a good 15 to 20 seconds for him to tank the camp and use his cooldowns, like his W. So doing blue buff and then crab is essentially me letting Hecarim have hang himself. This guy AFKs 2 minutes later. In this game, a bit of context, I had already killed the Rengar on his top camps. He started on his red buff, and after that I recalled a little later. Eventually, I took Rengar's level 4 Krugs, this is why I'm bot side, and I ganked bot afterwards, killing the Nord. Now when I pause it, what would you do? We know Rengar is ganking top on vision. So is there any attacking tempo here? Can I recall and run at one of Rengar's camps? Now if you got this, I applaud you. You are cracked. So I